You could tell us all about that in a minute. I will hear. All right, good evening. I'm going to call to order the January 22nd meeting of the Arlington Redevelopment Board, recorded by ACMi here this evening. We are back here tonight to discuss the final discussion, I hope, of continued public hearing over a special town meeting article regarding zoning bylaw amendment and recodification continued again. So I'm going to turn it over to Jenny Raitt to describe to us what's happened in the last 2 weeks, to discuss the meeting of the zoning recodification working group and the citizens group, and bring the board up to speed on where we stand now. We have had the opportunity to review the final draft, and I think we're prepared to take a vote one way or the other this evening. So, Jenny.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. Jenny Raitt, Director of Planning and Community Development, and I can report to you that the zoning recodification working group had a meeting the Friday after the last board meeting. And we met with 2 members of the citizens group to discuss all of the comments in their document that was provided to us, which was essentially focused on the issues that they had identified as substantive or potentially substantive policy changes. We did talk about the other comments as well, but mostly focused our attention and time on those matters. And I'd say that we, as a result of that, came to agreement about how to approach the various issues along the way. And this was reviewing about 124-ish page document that particular morning, which then led to, we had additional comments and questions that came up along the way, but mostly we were focused on the Citizens Guide comments. And I think that provided us with some direction for the remainder of the week before we got to, obviously, last Thursday, which was when everything was posted for this agenda tonight. And subsequent to that meeting, we were able to amend and revise the hearing draft of the bylaw with track changes that identified anything new that had been amended prior in between from the last version of the hearing draft with the amendments. And what that netted was some, I would say, a lot of things that needed to be addressed in the use tables, in the dimensional and density regulations, where things had either shifted as part of, I would say, a typographical issue, or things were reversed from what's in the existing zoning bylaw versus what is in the proposed zoning bylaw. And a number of issues with either things that were not quite in the right order to reflect the original intent of what's in the existing zoning bylaw, or to capture language that had been definitely inadvertently deleted from the proposed zoning bylaw that we wanted to make sure was added back in. That was the majority of the issues that I was able to go through and address and amend over multiple days of editing and back and forth with members of the zoning recodification working group. There were, however, a number of issues that were raised by the citizens group who had suggested that there were other areas where we might need to turn our attention, or we might not want to focus on because they didn't think that it fit within the scope of this project, which included things around administrative rules and regulations, and at times language changes that were intended to modernize the proposed zoning bylaw, which is different from the way that the existing zoning bylaw works, and that's including definitions. It's also including how we group uses, and occasionally how we approach the use of the bylaw. So those things, some of those things may not exactly fulfill the wishes of the citizens group because they are still not done. And so therefore, 5:30 last night received a follow-up from the citizens group, which identified the continuing items that this group of people feel are still outstanding matters for the board or that need to be addressed. After that, this is a very long story and I apologize. I'm not going to tell you what else I did over the past week, by the way. This was it. So after that, we were able to, a number of people from the working group over the course of the day were able to go through the remaining comments from the citizens group and address them line by line to identify those things that we still perhaps need to address, and then those things that we as a group feel are ready to go as they are. And so I'm ready to talk about that if you're interested.
Yes.
I think that summarizes everything. And of course, I also turn to those members of the working group who are in the audience who may also want to contribute to this and add anything that I may have left out from last meeting to this one, or the citizens group. If not, then I've handed out to the board a document that Steve Redevelopment put together, and I would say summarizes all of the comments that I received from the day from various working group members. I mean, I can go line by line if it would be helpful, or where would you like me to start?
Why don't we go with changes that are recommended?
Okay, so in the proposed zoning bylaw, under 4.2.1, the suggestion is to restore the word rapid in rapid transit right-of-way. Want me to continue going through?
What do you want comments on?
If you want to, if the board wants to comment as we go through.
Well,
that's
I just
appropriate.
want to make sure we're clear where these suggested actions came from exactly, because I don't think that these were from the zoning recodification working group as a whole.
These are from where do these comments come from?
Well, I'm not clear where all of the actions in the action column came from. Are those extracted from the citizens guide?
No, these are the recommended actions that we're recommending the board take. So that's, and by the
I think
working
David's
group.
question is because the working group didn't meet, who are those comments
Well,
coming from?
this is from Steve
Okay.
Redevelopment, which was,
All right.
and I'm glad to turn this to Steve for him to also talk about his document. But I would say that the only other people who I've heard from today, because again, we were commenting on something from this evening, last night rather,
Mhm.
were from Steve, Nancy, and Christian. Those are the only comments.
Okay. And that follows with the document that was received at 5:30 yesterday evening from the citizens group.
Right.
Okay. So maybe,
So we've suggested a number of cases where, and I would say, having gone through this myself, I would agree with these actions. It is not there's not a consensus of the working group per se, because the working group hasn't met today. But I'm basing this on the review of the document that we received and what seems to still be outstanding that we may want to address. So there's some missing items from 5.4.3.
what,
You can see them here.
Steve, why don't you come up to the podium here, walk us through this with your comments. And David, you can chime in from time to time based on your experience with the zoning recodification working group. And if there's anyone else here from that group this evening, I ask that they come up and assist as well. So.
If we get into the
In the weeds.
nitty-gritty, it would be helpful.
So just a little bit of a background on this document. As the director mentioned, we received a sort of an updated list of comments from the citizens group last night. And after getting it, I just tried to sit down and go through, line by line and make sense of them, and based on my own, based on reading their comment, looking at what's in the proposed recodification, and looking at what's in the current bylaw, what we might want or might need to do. In some cases, there was, well, I'll I won't get into specifics because there are quite a few of them, but in some cases it was, you know, maybe a missing footnote. In some cases I felt that, you know, there was really no action to be taken. In a few cases I didn't understand the comments, and I tried to call that out. But this document reflects, at least at the, it's essentially my analysis.
Christian actually cannot be here this evening. Christian Klein, who serves on the working group. He did send an email with some notes as well, but they are reflected within this document.
Sorry to slow things up here. No.
Pardon me, is this document a public record that the audience can look at?
It's absolutely, but it's not printed this evening because I received it not that long ago. Similar to the Citizens Guide document, which is public record but not available because we received it at 5:30 last night. Sorry?
Well, why don't we move to the board and take questions on the document and any changes? I'll start with Jean.
Are we referring to this document? The one
We can
that's-
go through this document and the main draft and into questions to move things along here.
I should start by saying that I think everybody appreciates all the extra work that was done by the citizens group. And
Can you guys use the mic?
the work that was done by the citizens group and the zoning recodification committee and the staff from the previous draft to the current draft, which I think everybody believes is a lot closer to where it needs to be. I had some questions about Steve's draft. So should I go there and?
Go ahead, yeah.
Restoring the word rapid in rapid transit. I don't think anybody really uses the term rapid anymore in rapid transit. And I'm wondering if we're talking about public transit. And really that's what the modifier is to transit.
Like 111 Sunnyside Avenue. I mentioned that that one I put in, well, I do not have strong feelings either way. The comment pointed out that the word rapid had been removed from the phrase rapid transit. And my comment reflects, basically I'm saying yes, the word rapid was taken out of the clause rapid transit.
Okay.
Steve, why don't you stay up?
Okay.
Because.
Well, only that I agree with you. I mean, the term rapid transit is not the term of art today. When we talk about public transportation, we generally talk just about transit or perhaps public transit, but we don't really talk about rapid transit anymore.
My second question has to do with, down at the bottom of page 1, change dormitory to dormitory used for religious or educational purposes, and leave as Y in all districts. Right now, dormitories are SP in all districts, or in many districts, so this would actually, I think, result in a substantive change beyond what's required under the Dover Amendment.
Would, in order to address that, could someone let me borrow a copy of the proposed recodification? Oh, sure. Okay. So let's see, so in the current zoning bylaw, dormitory is use 1.06.
And if you look for, yeah, and it's listed as special permit.
Special permit.
So I don't think we should be changing it to as of right for everyone. And I think what we've done in the draft keeps it as SP except for those that are subject to the Dover Amendment. So for this one, I would disagree with you, Steve.
Okay, well, that is, I have no problem, I'm perfectly fine with that. I would just like to take a look at section 553 to
And I really haven't had enough time to read the rest of these, so I'll pass on the rest of them. Other than I think that if we end up incorporating them in, I think we're probably going to be where we need to be. It's subject to what people in the audience have to say.
Yeah, and it's, because of the timing, I think that's why it makes sense to have Jenny and Steve walk us through the different recommended changes. I think that makes sense to have Steve and Jenny walk us through the changes one by one, and those of us on the board can ask questions as they pop up. So let's go back to the very beginning, Jenny and Steve, and take us through the rationale of these recommended changes. I do agree with Jean's assessment here. Begin at the beginning.
Okay, begin at the beginning. So, and should we skip ones where,
Let's do
Well,
each of them. Yeah,
I'm sorry?
let's do each of them.
Let's do each of them. So the first one, the citizen comment was to do with a phrase in the guide that said, Section 4.2 also states that amendments to these maps are made in the same manner as other amendments to the bylaw. And the citizen comment states that they don't see this language in Section 4.2. My remark was that Section 4.2 states that zoning districts are shown on a map entitled Zoning Map of the Town of Arlington, Massachusetts, and dated 19 May 2015, aka the zoning map, on file in the office of the town clerk, et cetera, et cetera. So the district boundaries shown on the zoning map, including an overlay map entitled Wetland and Floodplain Overlay, are part of this bylaw. So because the map is part of the bylaw, my observation was that the map's part of the bylaw, you amend the map in the same way that you amend the bylaw unless there's something specific, with absent a specific provision to the contrary.
Make sure your mic is on.
Sorry.
That's better.
I would say I agree with that, and in addition, the state zoning code requires it. So I think you're right.
Yep, okay. I agree. Moving on.
Okay, so the next comment was in reference to current recodification, section 561. It states mixed-use development is allowed in the district without residentials. Mixed-use development is allowed in this district without residential space by special permit. Deleted by special permit in the last sentence. My observation was that according to the table of uses, anywhere where mixed use is allowed, it is only allowed by special permit. And the removal of the words by special permit from 561 did not have any change in meaning, produce a change in meaning.
Okay. I agree with that.
Okay, next, the word rapid and rapid transit, I think we covered that. Okay, so the next one is the citizen comment is missing footnote A from table of uses. And this is from the table of uses in the current bylaw. Let me see. So the footnote A states that projects with 6 or more residential units are subject to the affordable housing requirements in section 11.8. So my observation was that the footnote is informative, but it does not contain any policy, and the affordable housing requirements for 6 or more units appear in the recodification section 8.2.2.
I agree with that.
Okay.
Okay, so moving down, missing footnote B from table of uses. Footnote B applies to, my observation was that footnote B applies to single-family detached dwellings and states, one exception is made for attached single-family dwellings on Sunnyside Avenue, Gardner Street, Silk Street, Merrigan Street, and Fremont Street. Attached single-family dwellings existing in August 1975 on these streets are permitted as a right. I was not able to locate this text in the proposed recodification, and I suggested adding it as section 5.4.2C.
Can agree with that. Others? Okay.
Okay. Next comment was missing footnote C from table of uses. And footnote C in the present bylaw states that in the R0, R1, and R2 districts, no new facilities under use 2.04 shall be constructed, except at sites wherein these facilities existed as of August 1975. These existing facilities may be reconstructed to meet code requirements in accordance with a special permit under section 10.11 and 11.0. And use 204 is licensed nursing home, rest home, or convalescent home. My observation was that I was not able to find no uses, or I was not able to find equivalent language in the proposed recodification, and suggested adding a footnote for 542 subsection C.
Okay. Comments?
The next one is missing footnote D from the table of uses. Oh, sorry.
I'm word searching
Okay.
the hearing draft, and I find, I'm not sure this is the right place, but do you have a copy, Steve?
Yes, I do.
Take a look at, can't tell what page this is on mine. It's 5-18 districts and uses.
5-18.
At the top of, do you see that? 5-18, at the top of the page is large letter B.
Mm-hmm.
And down the page, in number 2, under B is exemption for particular streets. Is that the same provision or not?
No, it is not.
Oh, it's not, okay.
So subsection 2 comes from 606B, which exempts, what I get the folks at the building department will call the soldiers' homes. But this exempts them from some dimensional and density requirements. It does not address the issue of single-family attached dwelling as a use.
Okay, thanks.
You can go on.
Okay. So the next one was missing footnote D from the table of uses. And footnote D states that mixed use and industrial zones shall not include residential uses. My recommendation, my suggestion was to add that footnote to the table of uses in section 5.6.3.
Okay.
Okay, so the next three lines deal with use 6.22A, which is professional, business, medical, and dental offices in an existing building originally designed for single or two-family residential use, provided the building retains its characteristic design and fronts on a street with a right-of-way of less than 50 feet. So with respect to the section 5.4.3, which is uses in R districts, I believed that use is not covered and suggested adding a line. The last row in the portion of the table labeled office uses covers the case of a greater than 50 foot or greater right-of-way, but not the case of a right-of-way less than 50 feet.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Keep going.
So next item is 6.22A, missing from the B district table of uses, which is section 5.5.4. And my observation was that it appears in the last row of the office uses section of the table, and there was no corrective action required.
Okay.
Okay, so the third one is use 6.22A, missing from section 5.6.3, which is a table of uses for the MU planned unit, TI, and OS districts. Let's see.
This one's missing.
Yes, I agreed that it was missing. We covered the case of right-of-way greater than 50 foot or greater, but not the case of a right-of-way that was less than 50 feet.
It's right here.
So it's corrective action. So we just add that again.
Mhm.
Okay, so we'll add that back to the appropriate spot. Okay.
Okay, the next item is use 8.07 missing. Use 8.07 is office within his place of residence of a physician, MD, with up to one non-resident employee or clergyman. Probably should say their place of residence, or perhaps her place of residence.
It's there.
It's there.
There is what we've been using.
Yes,
Yeah.
throughout.
I agreed that it was missing and suggested adding a row in the office uses of section 5.4.3 for physician or clergy office within a residence of up one non-employee, with up to one non-employee resident, non-resident employee.
Okay. That's fair.
Okay, so the next one was section 553, group home added, rehabilitation residence removed. My comment was based on the definition of rehabilitation residence in the current ZBL and group home in the recodification. I believe that rehabilitation residence would fall under the category of group home. I also noted that the Dover Amendment language, laws, or land use requirements on congregate living arrangements among non-related persons with disabilities that are not imposed on families and groups of similar size or other related persons shall constitute discrimination. Basically, I looked up the Dover Amendment and took out and clipped a section of language that I thought was relevant. And I surmise that, you know, that's the reason why group home is allowed in all districts. Okay, so the next
Okay.
issue is dormitory, and I believe we covered that.
We did cover that.
Okay, thank you. Item 4. Next citizen comment. Item 4.06, U.S. Post Office missing. If it falls under 5.2, permitted federal buildings, and okay, otherwise still a question.
I think post office is considered a federal building. Okay with that.
That was my observation. Okay, the next one is table of uses in section 553. Municipal radio or television studio appears as special permit in District B2. This appears to be new, still a question. My interpretation was that this was a typographical error. Municipal radio or television studio or receiving facility licensed by the town and under town jurisdiction would correspond to use 5.04A in the current zoning bylaw, which would be special permit for District R2, not District B2. So we have the correct designation in R2, and the making special permit in a special permit designation in B2 was a Scrivener's error.
Okay, we'll correct that typo.
So the next one is conservation land, now yes in all districts, not open, just open space. My comment, what I wrote was this done for legal compliance? I can't find anything in the current zoning bylaw that would imply conservation land should be allowed in all districts. So
That is why it was done. That's based on comments, the feedback that we received from Bob Ritchie on prior to the hearing draft, his review of the whole zoning bylaw.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Next one is section 563, mixed use under light industry needs to add footnote D. Footnote D being that residential, what I said earlier. Mixed use in industrial zone shall not include residential uses. My suggestion was that, my thought was that this was covered under a previous comment.
Okay.
Okay. Next is 563. Accessory structure not used as part of business, special permit for T district added. That was a citizen's comment. My belief is that that was a mistake, and I suggested removing SP from the T district in the line accessory structure not used as a part of business.
Okay.
So if we remove it, it's not allowed at all? Is that the result?
Yes, and I believe that is consistent with the
What's before?
With the existing
yeah,
bylaw?
with the existing bylaw.
Okay.
Okay, so in 563, home occupation footnote C should reference section 5.9, not 5.8. Then footnote no longer available. My observation was that home occupation is allowed in the NU district per use 8.06, but not if customers or pupils come to the house for business or instruction per use 8.06A. The NU column should have a footnote, and it does, but the text of the footnote was removed. I suggested adding footnote C back to the table in 563, stating that if customers or pupils do not come to the house or business for instruction, alternatively, break this use listing into 2 rows to accommodate the differences.
I think this is captured actually in the definition.
Hold on.
Yes.
I don't unfortunately have the one that you put out today. I have an old one.
It's in the back now, the printed copy, if you're interested, but yes.
It is covered in the definition
But
with
if
track changes.
it's necessary as a footnote as well, we can add it. Same thing with the description of not having residential in the industrial district, but we can add that as well.
Okay.
It is in the definition,
It is in the
right?
definition.
Okay, so, which, I think we were trying to
That's what we were trying to
decrease our
do.
footnotes.
Yeah. Okay, that's in the definition, we can leave that on, unless anyone else has an objection to that.
All right, so the next item is section 542. The citizen's comment was changes other permitted structure from 2.5 to 3-2.5 stories. My observation was, I believe the comment is referring to the R4 district. I did not see an error. The other permitted uses line for R4 was corrected to read 2.5 stories and 3. So there's 3 crossed out with 2.5 next to it. And it's my belief, and it matches the current, what's in the current table of dimensional and density regulations for R4.
Okay.
The next one is also in 542. The comment is adds detached accessory structure and greater than and less than 80 square feet. So I believe that this is covered in section 6.18, setback of accessory buildings and other structures. So 618 gives setback requirements for accessory structures, and the proposed recodification merges that and puts that main information into the table of uses.
Okay.
I thought that was okay as is. So the next one, also section 542. So R5 floor area ratio combines all residential structures. My observation was that all R5 principal structures have a FAR maximum of 0.8. Since they all have the same floor area ratio restriction, only one row is necessary.
Okay.
So 542, again, the comment was R6 floor area ratio added, accessory buildings and garage structures with setbacks, front 20 feet, side 20 feet, and R rear 10 feet. My observation was the FAR column for accessory buildings in R6 contains no values, which is to say no restriction, and that was consistent with section 6.18 from the current zoning bylaw. Where in other words, the current zoning 618 regulates setbacks, but there's no regulation for floor area ratio of accessory structures.
Okay.
Okay, the next comment is R7 FAR added. Under R7, accessory buildings and garage structures with setbacks, front none, side 20, rear 20. This is still unchanged, now missing. My remarks were, I don't quite understand the comment. The floor area ratio of 1.5 for principal structures in R7 matches the current zoning bylaw. Perhaps a comment is saying the specifications for detached accessory structure less than or greater than 80 feet are missing. And we don't have those two, detached accessory structure rows for R7 in the FAR table. So perhaps.
So add the rows.
So your suggestion is adding a second row? Okay,
Yeah, that's-
that's fine.
The next comment related to section 552, and it states B2 open space for mixed use of greater than 20,000 square feet is missing. Yes, my observation was that mixed use in B2 has the same open space requirements regardless of lot size, so that one row would be sufficient. So next comment, B3, and this applies to 552. It's B3 mixed use usable open space was defined in footnote H. Now supposedly in 5.3.20, but this only defines max height exceptions, question mark. My observation was that footnote H states, open space requirements for residential uses computed from floor area ratios only shall be 10% landscaped and 20% usable in B1, B2, B3, B4, and B2A districts, and 15% usable in the B5 district. I was able to find that language in 5.3.21D. So I think that's okay as it is.
Okay.
Okay, so the next item is also in 552. It states front side rear was 0, 10 plus the quantity L over 10, 5. Now 0, 0, 10 plus the quantity L over 10. I believe the commenter may have misread the table of dimensional and density requirements. This refers to, I believe it was mixed use in B4. The table's shifted a little bit. So if you look at the table and you see the number 60 and you follow it straight up, you get height and stories. But if you look at the columns and see that they're all one tab over, I believe the proposed recodification matches the DL.
Okay. I'll agree with that.
So the next one is 552. It states B5 mixed use rear was B5 mixed use rear was 10 plus the quantity L over 10. Now the quantity H plus L over 6. I think this is another case of a row in the existing bylaw being shifted over by one tab stop, so the table alignment's a little wonky.
Okay.
All right, so the next comment is R7 was 20-foot front and 10-foot side and rear, now expressed as 15 plus the quantity H over 10 and the quantity H plus L over 6 greater than 20 feet. My observation was I didn't quite understand the comment. The current zoning bylaw specifies for R7 principal structures that the front, side, and rear yards should have setbacks of 15 plus H over 10, H plus L over 6, at least 20, and H plus L over 6, at least 20, respectively. This matches any permitted principal structure for R7 in the recodification. Now, I went on to note that recodification states that accessory structures in R7 have front, side, and rear yard setbacks of missing 20/20. That's what's in the proposed recodification. And these should be 10, 20, and 20, respectively, to align with the table in section 6.18.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Steve.
That's it?
That's all the way through.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for your hard work and efforts and outreach to the citizens group. So, go ahead, Jenny.
There's a couple more comments that came from Christian, which was then, I think, Ralph Wilmer confirmed, who had also looked at the definitions. So these are some recommended changes to the definitions, also in response to the comments from the Citizens Guide.
I have a question.
Yes.
So who's the recodification committee going to vote on the changes they agreed to? Or just your group that gets together, makes changes, and agrees what they should be? Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to have you ask your question from the microphone so everyone can hear what you're asking, and then I'll respond. State your name and address, please.
Yes, Joanne Preston, 42 Mystic Lake Drive. I'm from the Webb Howard Neighborhood Preservation Group. I've been going to the meetings. I've been communicating with Jenny many times. And I came here because I thought there would be something that there'd be a meeting in which people would discuss what the recodification committee has voted on and presented to you. But that's not what's happening. It seems more like a work group.
Well, this is
Changing this, changing
so.
that.
This is the third continuation of a hearing that began 2 weeks ago,
Yes.
carrying through the procedure of the zoning recodification working group over the last year and a half. We tasked them after the second hearing a couple weeks back to go through and recommend certain changes to us, working with the citizens group that was out there. The citizens group came back. I think they met with, and I think Winnell Evans is here this evening, and she's been part of this. So Winnell, if you'd like to speak, I'll give you the opportunity as well to go through. And this is kind of the recommendations to the board as part of the cleanup effort. We had decided collectively amongst the five of us that we were very close to a final product that we were comfortable with. Just asked them to go back and review things with that group and make some changes and some comments. So this document is a result of the zoning recodification working group and staff's efforts to come to us with a final product. What Mr. Revelak just went through was a response to a document that was received yesterday evening in an attempt to address some of the concerns that were brought up after the citizens group had a chance to review this final draft.
The changes, Jenny, tell me if I'm wrong, the changes that were made on Friday afternoon, right?
No, the changes, which there's a draft on the back table, those changes were made and posted with the agenda for this evening's meeting on Thursday. And so that's when they were distributed. You may have received it on Friday, granted, because of timing of whenever the email went out, but they were posted on Thursday.
So I got to read it on Friday afternoon, and so did they. So they spent all weekend on it, thank you. And they put their comments Sunday night, is that right?
That's right.
That is right.
But then, just a question about the process. Doesn't it go back to the recodification group for them to redo it? And we'd have Steve's ideas, which thank you for your ideas. Then we have somebody else's email. But as a group, you haven't approved these changes to submit to the committee.
That's a process question for the zoning recodification working group. They're advisory and providing direction in some ways to the board, but ultimately this is the board's decision on what to do with the zoning bylaw. So they can, it's not just the citizens group or the working group. We've received other comments as well, but that's up to the board.
The comments that they're making, I think, were presented to us as coming from them as individuals and not from the zoning recodification working group.
Okay, so the zoning recodification group has not met with these changes and approved them to submit to you.
They would not have had the opportunity to do so.
Yes, so is this really ready to be brought up at town meeting in a few weeks?
And that's what we're here to decide tonight. Thank you.
Well, I think it's obvious. Thank you.
Winnell, do you want to have the opportunity to address?
Winnell Evans, Orchard Place. I got the 118 track change version. I had been out of town for a good chunk of last week, so I got it on Thursday.
Microphone.
It's on, it's just closer.
So I received it on Thursday, and this time it was pretty much me solo. Paul Parise addressed a couple of sections. But to me, this raises an issue which is very closely related to Joanne's, which is at this point, Steve Revelak and I are making determinations about the zoning bylaw, which just, I don't know anything about zoning. You know, I'm going through this document and just looking for discrepancies, which I can easily pick out, but I certainly am light years away from having the qualifications to make any judgments about them. And with all due respect to Steve, you know, you're not a zoning professional, so that would be my comment number one. There were approximately, I went through, this is you know, give or take 10 in either direction, but there were approximately 181 issues flagged by the citizens group. After we met on Friday morning with the zoning recodification working group, there were approximately 96 that have since been corrected or addressed, which leaves 66 that have not yet been addressed. That's approximately 40 of the issues that we flagged. So it pains me to say this because I know how hard everybody has worked on this, but I just don't think that a document with 40% of the outstanding issues as yet.
Well, let's clarify what those issues are. Are those excuse me, are those issues that you as citizens have questions about, or are those fundamental issues that the board should be concerned with?
They are.
I think there's clearly a difference in opinion, and has been for some time, about what some of those things might be. And if we met and those were addressed and they continue, then that, I think, would be the recommendation. My assumption from that would be that that's at the behest of the zoning recodification working group.
It is a mix of those things. They are things that were never addressed to begin with, and they are also things that the working group indicated in the Friday morning meeting would be addressed, some of which have not. For instance, existing bylaw 9.03, which deals with residential lot of record, disappeared completely from the hearing draft, and it was indicated in that Friday morning meeting that it would be restored, but it has not yet been. There are still existing typos that Steve did not catch that are unresolved, and I know that there are a couple of other of the members of the citizens group here tonight who want to speak to some other issues, so I won't step on their toes. But the answer to that, Andrew, is that yes, it's a mix of issues.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I suppose I've opened the door, and this is the last opportunity that anyone will have. So if there's anyone else who would like to step up and speak, I'll allow it. Please be as brief as you possibly can. Mr. Loretti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Loretti, 56 Adams Street. Can you hear me okay?
Question for the audience, Mr. Loretti.
Can you all hear me all right? And I thank the board for keeping the public hearing open. I have to agree with Ms. Evans that while I appreciate your efforts, or various staff members' efforts to address the comments that have been previously submitted, there still are a lot of outstanding issues, and I really don't think this is ready for this special town meeting vote. I'd like to run through just a few of them, which I don't think you've seen before, because I frankly just touched them up for myself. Under the definitions, I don't see why the current definition of building detached needed to be changed, and haven't heard any explanation for that. I don't see why a shed is now being defined as having less than 80 square feet. We spoke previously about the definition for catering. Now there is just one definition for something called catering service, but in the table of use regulations, or what used to be called the table of use regulations, you have catering service both as a principal use and as an accessory use with different regulations. And I don't know how you decide which is which when somebody comes in and says they want to do catering. And I think this is an issue I've noted in other places. There doesn't seem to be an appreciation in the current bylaw between accessory uses and principal uses. I brought up the issue of dog houses the last time as an example of something called a small accessory structure. I still don't think that's correctly incorporated into the bylaw. It's done inconsistently and not completely correctly. Sometimes it's referred to as a minor accessory building of less than 8 square feet. Other times it's defined as a detached accessory structure less than or equal to 80 square feet. Sometimes listed as being limited to 1 story. Other times there's no story limitation given. In R7 it's not considered at all, even though the text of the existing bylaw says it applies to all residential zones. And more importantly, when I go through the table of dimensional requirements, it doesn't mention anything about what the setback requirements are for such a structure. We talked last time about the requirements for a minimum yard width that applies throughout the front yard. There was an attempt made to correct that, but it's still not clear that the minimum lot width applies to the entire front yard at all points in the front yard. Something new I noticed under 562A, the table heading has something like frontage / lot width. Lot width and frontage are not the same thing. And under that part of the table, they seem to be confused. There was a change made to 8.1.3A to address comments related to nonconformities in the building footprint. And you don't increase the nonconformity, but as it's written now, frankly, it's very confusing, and it doesn't include a key sentence that's in the existing bylaw that says if you do that, you don't increase the resulting non-conformity of the structure, and that it is permitted without special permit. In 8.1.7b, there was a policy change made over the course of this recodification that has not been addressed or justified, and that is it gives the ZBA significant new powers to resurrect nonconformities. That's something new in the bylaw. There was never any justification given, and frankly, it's I consider a major policy change that really shouldn't be allowed. Similarly, another policy change that's not in the bylaw, there was a vote in the town meeting several years ago to require any testimony given in 40B hearings to be made under oath. That disappeared and has not reappeared. So I want to emphasize this. So all based on a fairly quick review, I'm sure there are other things out there. I frankly find the tables very confusing to read because I guess somebody decided not to put in landscape tables, so what used to be one table is now broken up into 3, but the column headings, the row headings are not consistent across tables, and it's very hard to follow. The tables are not numbered when they're broken up across pages, so when you're looking at this online, you never know what table you're in. And there's just a lot of usability issues that are still out there. I want to really say I appreciate that you didn't take action on this at your last meeting on Wednesday. I wasn't here to attend, able to attend. And I understand you were under quite a bit of pressure then to push this forward. Frankly, I saw the submission that town council made, and I'm really disappointed in it because it was such an obvious political push. He really should have been spending his time not on.
I'm going to stop you there. That's not. He's not here to respond.
What I'm saying, sir, is what's really needed is not politics. What's really needed is a very close reading by someone of the bylaw. And one thing I didn't mention was, as either our former president or governor said, words matter. And another change he made that I think gets back to the point of confusing accessory and principal structures. There's language common in the existing bylaw on the table of dimensional regulations that say, it says any other permitted principal use. In the new bylaw, it just says any permitted use. That's a significant change that I don't think has been fully appreciated. But those are the types of wording changes that you really need a lawyer to look through very closely to understand how this can be, the new bylaw can be interpreted differently. And I think at times when you didn't even intend it to be interpreted differently. I also want to address the claim that many people made that you have to rush into doing this because there are inconsistencies with state law. Well, there are inconsistencies with state law, and there have been for years and years and years. And you know what? It really hasn't been a problem. Because when those consistencies come up, all the building inspector does is he enforces the bylaw according to state law and not what's in the zoning bylaw. And if he has to do that for a couple more months or another year, it's really not a problem. The bigger issue are the things that are in the existing bylaw that are not inconsistent with state law, that aren't being enforced. And I'm afraid the way this bylaw is right now, it actually makes it easier to perpetuate those sorts of decisions and nonconformities. So I really urge you to vote no action on this for the special town meeting. There should be time available to submit it to the annual town meeting. And frankly, I think you're really going to damage your credibility by putting this before the special town meeting. Because if you can't get something that's polished and 100% ready for the special town meeting when all you're doing supposedly is just making formatting changes, minor edits, it's really going to make it much more difficult when you're trying to do more substantial changes before town meeting. Thank you.
Before you leave, Chris, can I ask you one question?
Yeah.
You threw a lot of stuff out there, that were still not completing changes. And I just want to just delve down to maybe one.
Sure.
Just so I know I can follow through exactly what you mean by some, big change. Okay. And the one I want to talk about is you mentioned this one on 8.1.7B.
Yeah.
Okay, you said that is a significant change, right? Can you just elaborate a little bit more so I understand what you're
getting
getting at?
That's an excellent.
I just want to make sure we're all on the same
No, I
page here.
appreciate that. That's a really good one to ask about. And the bylaw is very clear that it's the policy of the town not to perpetuate nonconformities. So if you have a nonconforming use, say, and I know you don't like to talk about specific things, but say you've got a gas station that's now on a residential lot. If it's a non-conforming use, what the current bylaw says, if that ceases operation for a period of 2 years, then you lose that protected non-conforming status. You can no longer put a gas station there. Okay? You have to use that land for what's permitted, whatever it is in its zoning district. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. What this change says is now, 20 years from now, you go before the ZBA, and if the ZBA likes it, and they don't think it's going to be detrimental to the neighborhood, they can put that gas station back in. Okay. Same thing with dimensional nonconformities. I think that's a major change. And
Where does it say that, what you just said on here?
okay, so what I'm going to read in that 8.1.7b is the last sentence says, well, let me read the whole thing. Any non-conforming use of a conforming use of a conforming or structure. I'm not sure I'm reading from the. Did we say it that way?
Yep.
Okay, because I copied it. Okay, let me read it. The way I think I copied it from the text itself. Any non-conforming use of a conforming or structure and lot.
No, or struck. It's any non-conforming use of a conforming structure and lot.
Okay. Which has been abandoned, demolished without reconstruction, or not used for a continuous period of 2 years, shall lose its protective status and be the subject of all provisions of this bylaw. However, the Board of Appeals, which is the zoning board of appeals, may grant a special permit to authorize the reestablishment of a non-conforming use of structure where such reestablishment shall not result in substantial detriment to the neighborhood. So it's the last part of that I was referring to.
Okay.
And actually, I added a couple extra copies of it, so we can.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Other comments, questions, concerns? Speak now, or Mr. Warden.
There's only
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Worden, town meeting member, precinct 8. Well, I concur with some of the previous speakers that really don't understand what the rush is. Now, I know the planning director was quoted in either the paper or your Arlington is saying we're going to take a year and a half to get this approved. I don't know where that's coming from. If it's not approved at this special town meeting, if you could have an annual town meeting, you simply think that's a bad idea for some reason, it would be approved, when the Attorney General gets around to it in the fall of this year. That's, 9 months off. Or you could have a special town meeting in the middle of the town meeting. I'm sure the selectmen will do whatever you tell them to do in that regard. But I urge you, as I did at the last meeting, if this is important, and I was quoted as saying it's the most important law the town is going to pass, it's worth getting right. And when the people have, you said, from day one, the first public hearing in this room, I said, why don't we have something like a red line edition? Couldn't be done, won't be done, not on the agenda. And then finally, Mr. Riverack produced a red line edition, but the problem with it is, and no disrespect to Mr. Riverack, but a real red line edition takes the original text and puts red lines through the stuff you're deleting and writes in red the stuff you're adding. And in the margin it says we took out sentence A, B, C, and we put in sentence X, Y, Z. What he did, he and his, I know he wasn't alone in this endeavor, which was monumental, is took the new bylaw and related it to sections in the old bylaw. But if some section in the old bylaw was just disappeared, like some unfortunate citizen of a totalitarian state, it never, it just disappeared. It wasn't, no change was shown. So we still don't, and in the Citizens Guide, I mean, Mr. Parisi and Ms. Evans, worked this weekend to go through this stuff one more time and point out the errors, and had a meeting and pointed out the errors, the omissions, the changes, etc. And you did 60%. Well, that's great. 60% is better than 0, which is where we were 2 weeks ago. But it's not 100%. And the town deserves 100% correct addition on this. And if you had done what we said at the very beginning, take the old wine and put it in new bottles, and bring your changes on at a subsequent event, that would be fine. And you didn't want to do that. You wanted to put it in this new format and make all these changes, and now we're gradually trying to get back to where you should have been at the outset. And these points, if you go forward to special town meeting, these points will be made at that meeting. And you need a 2/3 vote. You need a 2/3 vote. And I don't think this deserves that vote at this point. Now, just a couple of specific comments. I was particularly unhappy to see that the thing that John Velskis put to a town meeting a few years ago on 40B and getting the sworn testimony of witnesses before a ZBA 40B hearing. The reason for that is that if you go to the hack, they will discount any testimony that wasn't given under oath. And you took that language out. It was promised that it would be put back in, and it still is not in there. And Mr. Loretti just pointed it out here.
Jenny, can you respond to that? Because I know there is some information about that.
So this particular comment is with regard to the removal of something that is in this category of administrative rules and regulations. And we've discussed at previous meetings, the working group has discussed, this board has discussed, that has been part of this project from the beginning. And the Zoning Board of Appeals actually has begun its own process of starting to talk about their rules and regulations. I'm not a representative of the ZBA and cannot speak to exactly their discussions as of this date and time, but can tell you that they are working on and would include that particular provision in their rules and regulations as part of their administrative processes, but that, as we have discussed from the beginning of the project, would move those things out of the zoning bylaw. Now, again, if the board so desires to have certain components of administrative rules or regulations put back into the zoning bylaw, that is something that could be done this evening or at a future time as well. For example, one comment that we had from your group and others was, why are you removing fines from the zoning bylaw, which is currently part of the existing zoning bylaw?
Why are you moving what?
Fines.
Signs. Oh, yeah.
No, fines, like
Signs.
as in,
Fine.
Now you put them back in.
we put them back in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that we put those back in. So if there are other comments like that, and again, if the board so chooses, then that is something that we can discuss further. But that particular one is lumped into the Zoning Board of Appeals, rules and regulations, and again,
Right.
I'm not speaking on behalf of the ZBA, but that is where that currently lives. So that's the only response I
If
have.
I may respond to that comment, Mr. Chairman, all very well to say it's going to be written down somewhere, but the zoning bylaw can only be changed by 2/3 vote at town meeting. The rules and regulations can be changed by the board that makes them. And I'm on a board that makes rules and regulations. We can change them whenever we want, nobody even knows about it. I think that is a very key thing. That's one of those things that should be in the zoning bylaw. Now, another thing that I noticed is Mr. Revelak was rattling off a list of uses and use number, whatever, 5 something, dot, all these parentheses. But the print I have doesn't show any of these uses being numbered. So it was kind of hard to track what he was talking about. So I hope that if you do go further on this, you will at least number these uses. So it's kind of hard. You've got pages and pages of these charts and direct microtype to figure out, what the uses are supposed to have numbers. Why aren't the numbers here? It seems bizarre. And I think these tables printed up and down instead of sideways as they were in the old bylaw are extremely confusing. I think the way they're set out in different kind of formats is very confusing. And one very, very specific thing, 9.03, which was disappeared, and it said you merged it with this other section. But the other section, and I was just looking at it in this print, and of course I don't know if this is the final thing or what, but what this is, and I was the author of that amendment when it was put into the bylaw originally, some years ago. The point is that 5 lots, undersized lots, if they were vacant, and they've always been vacant, can be built upon as long as they're 5,000 feet and they're not owned in contiguous ownership with an adjoining lot. Now, then it kind of follows the section of general laws. I think it's section 48, section, I forgot, I think it's maybe 6 or 8 or something. But the point is, and the reason that was put in is that adjoining sub-sized lots were being permitted for building. The way the new language is somewhat of an improvement, but it's still subject to unfortunate interpretation. I think it should say that there's no building on it and there never has been any building on it. I don't know who's going to track whether a building permit was issued prior to 1975 or what. The point is, a developer could come in, buy one of these undersized lots, knock the house down, and then say, okay, I got a vacant lot. There's no building on it. I know that's not the intention, but stranger things have happened. So I believe that section, as long as you're remodeling it, should say there was never a building on it, and that maybe add just belt and suspenders for the enlargement or replacement of an existing building on such a lot, a special permit is required. Well, there's many other things I could say, but I would urge you to, as I said at the last meeting, let's get this right. Whatever, I don't know what your agenda is, why it's so important that this be dealt with on the 12th of February, except that it's that great 40th anniversary of the infamous Great Blizzard special permit for a 13-story building, which was stopped by a group of citizens, by the way. In fact, I filed a zoning bylaw amendment that reduced the size of that building from 13 stories to 5, and we got it through very handily. So I urge you to, once again, to do the right thing, take the time to get this right. A lot of work has been done in the past week, and since your prior meeting, to get this right. And of course, a lot of it wouldn't have been necessary if you tried to do it right in the first place. So take some more time. Let's get it right so we can everyone who's concerned about zoning and planning this community can work together on it instead of being at odds with one another. Thank you.
Other comments, questions? Mr. Klein.
Good evening, Christian Klein, resident 54 Newport Street, town meeting member, precinct 10, zoning board of appeals, member of the zoning recodification working group. So I just want to make a couple of quick comments. I understand that there are many issues that the citizens group brought forward that they say have not been addressed. I would like to reassure them that they have been addressed, but that if the zoning recodification working group doesn't agree with your decision about what should be made as a change to the zoning bylaw, does not mean that we are ignoring you. It just means we have a difference of opinion. And I think that it is often stated that we are deliberately ignoring the comments that come in, and I want you to rest assured that we are listening to your comments, we are discussing your comments, and we are trying to come up with the appropriate action. And sometimes that will not be what specific comments that come in from the outside are, but they're comments that are deliberated among our group and that we have come to a decision regarding what we feel the language ought to be. Specifically on the question of zoning board of appeals, so we are possibly the only or one of two groups in town where 2/3 of town meeting decide how we run our meetings. As the last speaker said, you know, there are strong advantages to having a board that is able to decide how its operations run, and that is something that enables a board to function. And currently, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I know specifically the ARB, have rules that are in the zoning bylaw that they cannot adjust themselves, that are archaic. And for that reason, there is, I believe that there's a good reason why the State Zoning Act gives the right to make rules and regulations for the Zoning Board of Appeals to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And so we are in the process of discussing that currently. We do have a set of comprehensive permit bylaws that were enacted a couple of years ago. Those are currently under review, specifically in regards to the question that was raised by the previous speaker. we are also putting in effect general rules and regulations, which the board has not had since its inception. So those are things that we are currently working on to try to make it clearer exactly how our board works, so it's more transparent to the community and to people who are coming before the board. The last question I have is sort of this question on delay. Obviously, those of us on the board, we've been working on this for 18 months. We had a series of hearings over the summer. We received some comments then, and it seems that the closer we come to a deadline, as with everything else in life, most of the, 90% of the work gets done in the last 10% of the time. If this board decides to act now, or if this board decides that we need to go back and take more time, whatever the case is, I would hope that the community involvement would occur at a pace where we can come to a decision and come to a final document in a timely fashion, and that we are not, if this is postponed until the Springtown meeting, that we are not waiting until mid-April to start looking at the document again. And that the pace of discussion and the pace of looking through things is maintained, because it certainly feels like there was really very, very little there seems to be a lot of people who have a lot of concerns who did not bring their concerns forward until the very last minute. And I understand that there's some concerns about the redlining. It is not a trivial process to redline a document like this. And we've had the guide documents out there. We've done our best to try to present this as well as we can to the town. And we just hope that whatever decision the board makes, that it sort of reflects your intention for what's the best interest of the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Others? This will be...
Well, Mr. Chairman, may I make just one point?
I'm going to allow this gentleman to speak, and then I'll allow you to speak, Mr. Ward.
My name is Marshall Lawton. I live on Winchester Road, and I was on the Zoning Board of Appeals for 10 years in the 1990s. And I respectfully disagree with, or want to agree with, their desire to have control of the process they use in terms of their own regulations. The Zoning Board of Appeals exists because the zoning code, no zoning code can really address all the issues of a particular lot. And that is why the only reason the zoning board exists is to deal with the unusual features that may require or allow for a special permit, or a variance, or a disagreement with an opinion of the building department. So it makes sense to me that if you have regulations that shoehorn in, you technically can only look at this because that's what the regulations allow. And yet, to really adjudicate that case, you need other information, and so forth. You need an openness in a board that is dealing with unique conditions. And so, to make it, I think, being published is important so that people can understand exactly what the rules are. But the rules can be adjusted because of the unique character of a lot. And I know this was particularly difficult in the 90s, but even now it's even more difficult because regulations are, and the code is getting even more complicated. So I like to second their thing, as long as their rules and regulations are published somehow. So it's not a secret piece of information, and then they can talk to whoever's they can talk to, so they can adjust what they're proposing. So I'm just going for that, the second.
Thank you. Mr. Warden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to make 2 points in response to the last 2 speakers. The very last one, I'm certainly not suggesting, and I did not suggest, that all the everything governing the ZBA's operation should be in the zoning bylaw. Just that one point about taking testimony under oath, because that is something that if it's not done, that testimony is not there. And dealing with 40Bs, and hopefully we won't have to deal with any more because we're over the 1.5, but that's still in litigation. So we need to protect ourselves in every way we can from that, and I see no harm in putting that line back in the zoning bylaw. With respect to the previous speaker, and I agree that a lot of the sound in the fury, if you will, has come within the last few months. But bear in mind, we did not have what purported to be a nearly final draft until the week before Christmas. How could we react? There was reaction to the previous drafts. Changes were supposed to be made. The second draft came along that hadn't really made the changes. The third draft came along, and I guess that's the one just before Christmas. A lot of people spent their holidays going over that. Now we have yet another draft. I mean, you can't blame the people who are reacting that they didn't react before they had the information they're supposed to react to. And again, what it says is, what's the rush? Let's get it right. Take the time to get it right. Thank you.
Thank you. This is the last opportunity anyone will have to speak. Yes, before I turn it over to the board, I will not open, yes ma'am, I will not open public comment further after you're finished this evening.
Hi, Nancy Flynn Barber, Precinct 18. I was also on working group. There are a lot of things that were mentioned today, but I do want to bring up one specific thing that was mentioned twice. Old section 9.03. Nancy? Old section 9.03, it was said that we said at the working group meeting that it was going to be added back in, and we didn't. I was at that meeting. I don't remember saying that was going to be put back in. Let me finish. I don't remember saying it was going to be put back in. I remember said that it was taken out because it was already repeating 40A or something.
Exactly.
But what was going to be addressed was the concern about 606A and the small lots, and that was addressed. And Mr. Warden just mentioned that we have in there that it says buildings that were on there and not buildings that were never on there, or that they've never had a building. The language that's in there is exactly the language that was in there. So that wasn't part of it. But the language that we added is word for word what was in 606A.
Thank you.
I have one. This is actually a follow-up also from one of the working group members. And Christian, I'm going to read an email. You're welcome to, or Ralph as well, who I mentioned, as I was starting to mention, did the work on the definitions through the working group, reviewing them and providing feedback along the way. So there are a couple of recommended changes. These were in response to the citizen group. Could I go through those real quick?
You may.
Thank you. So, okay, building detached, and I think that Chris Loretti brought this up in his comments. We are recommending to change structural to physical in the definition, if you want to follow. And then the second one is building front, building line, changing the definition to building line front, a line drawn parallel to the front boundary of a lot along the front foundation wall of a building or through the point on a building closest to the front boundary. Slight amendment to what was there. And then the last item is under 5.3.22B. This was to align this piece to the definition for story half by changing roof joists to roof structure.
Okay.
And then some comments where we thought we might need some more information. There were some feelings about why we had changes to things such as consumer service establishment, apartment building, 3-family dwelling, 2-family dwelling, gross floor area, light manufacturing sign. And we really didn't understand there were not any reasons indicated why there were changes that were necessary by the citizens group in their guide document. And then lastly, we discussed this when the working group met, that we would not take any action on the following, that they're fine with the definitions as is for the following definitions: attic, auto body shop, awning, building height, business or professional office, catering service, deck, duplex dwelling, multifamily dwelling, single-family dwelling, home occupation, right-of-way, and half-story. That's it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other comments from people in the audience? Now is the time to speak. Seeing none, I'll move it over to the board. Jean, I'll begin with you for any questions or comments this evening.
I have one question, well, more than one question. The first question, which was related to something
Want to use the phone?
which, the question's related to one of the points Mr. Loretti made about what's now in 8.1.7, which allows the Board of Appeals to grant a special permit to authorize the reestablishment of a non-conforming use or structure. I'm sort of wondering where that came from, if it wasn't in the current bylaw.
So,
8.1.7B.
this is directly from the existing zoning bylaw.
No, except the part that Mr. Loretti said is not, is the part that starts, the phrase, or the clause that starts, however the Board of Appeals may grant the special permit to authorize. So it's the second clause, and it's not in the current bylaw. I'm just wondering where that clause came from, if you know.
I will look at it. I have to get back to you. Okay, I can't answer it this exact. I'll look.
Maybe we'll let other people ask questions before we discuss what to do.
Okay, David.
Well, I had not had an opportunity to look at the revised citizens group comments that came in last night, or my fellow recodification working group members' responses to those comments. I think we've resolved, to my satisfaction, the comments that Steve Revelak raised and went through with us. I'm feeling a little uncertain, I think, because we've got comments in emails, comments in various documents, and I'm not sure exactly how we would frame this to approve it tonight, with all of the various comments from different sources floating around. So I'm slightly concerned about that from a process perspective right now. Beyond that, I don't have any specific questions or comments.
Ken.
Microphone, please.
I share the same feelings here. I do want to make a comment saying that, yes, there was a comment mentioned that there was like 181 issues that were brought out on this thing here, and 96 of them were addressed. And I believe all of them were addressed one way or another. Some of them just weren't changed because there was a disagreement or a different opinion on some of those issues. So I think that's a little swayed a little bit. I'm not saying it's all right or wrong, but I'm saying, look, we have to say, not everybody's gonna have the same opinion on all 181 issues. There's going to be some disagreement here. Maybe it's not 1/3, maybe it's a little less. I'm not sure right now. That's what I'm sort of a bit on the fence on right now. I just want to make that statement saying that it wasn't addressed. It was addressed. It just maybe it wasn't agreed with. And I think that's a change that I just want to make a statement that is more of what I believe in right now. I too looked at this last submission and with all these comments, and I didn't have a chance to really look at this in depth, and so I'm not agreeing with all. I think I probably will most of it, but I'm not really agreeing with all assessments of saying yes, it's already been covered, or no, it's not need to be covered, or I just didn't have enough of a chance to really get into that. And I'm just on the fence right now how to proceed. And I'd like to talk amongst the rest of the board members here and see what people think. You know, this is, I see both points right now. You know, this is only the beginning. And if you don't start somewhere, you'll never get anywhere. And I want to leave it at that and I'll maybe come back.
Okay. Andy, use the microphone.
So David, maybe you're the one to answer this, but the recodification group, are they recommending answers to the latest round, which seems to be coming in the last week?
Well, I think Jenny explained the timeline.
Yes.
So the citizens group sent a revised version of their marked up guide on Sunday evening, which some members of the recodification working group had the opportunity to review, and a few of them emailed various comments back to Jenny and the rest of the group over the course of Sunday and today, and that's the timeline.
But the recodification group has not had a chance to gather all this and say, okay.
No, we haven't met since 2 Fridays ago when we met with 2 of the members of the citizens group.
I think it would be appropriate to accept the comments from Steve Revelak and Christian Klein as individual recommendations and not those reflected as the opinion or the vote of the zoning recodification working group. That being said, both of them have been integral in that group and part of the process throughout, so I tend to give their comments, even though they're coming from them individually, some substantial weight.
But they've not had a chance to meet together and say, these we agree.
Use the microphone, please.
But they've not had a chance to meet together and go up and down the list and say, okay, this is the next round of comments.
No, there would have had to have been compliance with public meeting laws
Right.
and meetings announced, et cetera. They would have had time to schedule a meeting to get together, which
Right.
didn't happen.
Okay, well, that was my question. It's all getting compressed into this window here, and are we, given the fact they haven't met, would they agree, would they recommend to proceed on the basis of some of these loose ends that may or may not be picked up? We don't quite know yet. And is it, under these circumstances, are we going to be able to lay out a straightforward enough process to get this thing pushed through in the special town meeting? I don't know the answer. That's why I was kind of questioning David a little bit about, they've been our mentors, and establish the entire process of this thing. Now they haven't had a chance to finish off their work.
I mean, I have to say, I'm a little confused. I thought that the original comments from the citizens group that we received a couple weeks ago had, and which we had discussed as a group with a couple of the members, had been fully addressed, although perhaps not in agreement with the citizens group after discussion among the members of the zoning recodification working group. And I'm still hearing questions coming from citizens today that, in fact, some of those things have not been addressed in the way that they believe the zoning recodification working group agreed to address them. And short of going back through this document again now and comparing the changes, I can't answer that question with certainty. I'll just have to defer to Jenny, who actually was the one making all the changes, as to whether there are any of the points that have been raised tonight where someone believed that a change was going to be made but hasn't been made. Are there actually any cases like that you're still aware of?
Glad to answer. I think that we've addressed that in Steve's comments and then also in the subsequent comments from Christian. And then I think that you've received an answer from others with regard to how those, I realize it's not necessarily representative of the entire working group, but how there may be some, we haven't resolved it, but we may not resolve it because that may be a point of disagreement on how to resolve something. So I think we've actually answered all of the things that came from that group, and now have things that we still do need to address, which we went through point by point. That's my sense of it. Just really quickly on the 8.17B. Sorry, following up. It's from a combination of 905A and 1010F in the existing bylaw.
Was that practice
Now,
currently allowed?
It's a current practice also, and it's, it is not verbatim language. That's, again, we've had that. That's part of, I think what the feedback has been is the exact language of the existing zoning bylaw is not completely in the proposed bylaw. And there's feelings about that and a tension there. This may be one of those.
So, but was that combination of sources that were combined into the new section not fully captured in the guide?
Well, the guide document, as I think we know, is not up to date now. So we will need to go back and update that guide document regardless of what happens, because it needs to be, it doesn't quite track with where we are today. And the citizens group actually did some of that work by noting where things were, didn't quite align, and then we also have done our own work. It's just at the end of all of this process, that would be something we do next. I will just also point out one other comment about usability and readability, which was mentioned by a previous speaker. The tables I am waiting to format completely by capturing the heading so that you can read a row and column as you would read a typical table. I'm waiting until everything, once I accept all changes, then I can format the tables a little bit better. Right now they look like they look because they're not really something that I can work with that easily. And then in terms of numbering all of the uses, we've agreed as a working group not to do that. for the simple point that if you amend those uses at any point in time in the future, which is what we had pointed out wanted to do in the beginning of this process, it would be challenging to do that once you start a numbering system again, which is what we have in the existing zoning bylaw. So now I realize that that doesn't help with some folks' feelings about readability, but there might be another way to address that matter other than through numbers, a number system.
And I participated in that discussion
Yes.
in the working group, and another aspect of that was brought up is that it is more consistent with modern practice in formatting these tables not to use numbering for the uses.
So let me see if I understand you, Jen. You're saying that the clause that Mr. Loretti pointed out in 8.1.7b, giving the Board of Appeals the ability to grant a special permit to continuing and otherwise abandon non-conforming uses current practice
Current
in the
practice.
town?
And also combining
Combining the
two
two.
different points that I made.
So, I mean, I guess I'll sort of cut to the chase about what I think we should do. What we have is a number of suggested comments by Mr. Revelak, and I think we agreed with all of them except maybe not put the word rapid back in and not make the change we proposed to dormitory. Then we have a number of changes that Jenny mentioned that had been recommended. I personally would like the sentence put back in about 40B testimony being under oath, and I think it's reasonable to put that in. I lost my page where I was going to do that. I think it's reasonable to put that in 3.2.3, where one of the things would be to require the 40B provisions to be under oath. If we were to compile all of those, meaning the changes that Steve suggested that we went through, and thank you, Steve, the other changes that were mentioned, plus that, I think it's as close as we're ever going to get to something, and I would send it to town meeting, because I just feel like this is an ever sort of balloon where you push one thing and it pushes out another way. But I think if, on the other hand, if the zoning recodification working group feels like it wants another shot at this, then I don't think we should send it to special town meeting, and we should keep it to regular town meeting.
Okay. I think I agree with your first point. The discussions that are having are more philosophical discussions that will continue to happen no matter how much additional time we give this process. I think we've done the work. We've gone through the questions. 2 weeks ago we sat here and said that we were 95% to a final document. And I think if we accept the changes that are suggested by Steve Revelak and Christian Klein, understanding that those are made as individuals and don't necessarily reflect the opinion of the zoning recodification working group, but that we can take the document as a whole with the changes that have been put in to date, that is recommended to us by the zoning recodification working group, and I think that's a correct assumption, David. In that having this, as I've said throughout the process, having this be the singular focus of a special town meeting, I think is drastically important, because it deserves that kind of light shined on it to allow for a broad discussion of any issues that are in here, and not to be put to the side after or in favor of other items that certain town meeting members may be more inclined to focus on. I do think that there's a clear path through from here to special town meeting as far as advocacy on the part of the board. There are 2 further meetings for the public to be more of a presentation and question and answer session. There are 2 more to be scheduled, just pending the decision of a couple of school principals. And there are some other outreach ideas put forth by put forth by the zoning recodification working group and staff that I think will get us out there to have a clear understanding of what we would actually be asking town meeting to vote on in special town meeting. So I think I'd be in favor of moving it forward this evening. I spoke out of turn, so I'll go back to David or Andy.
What does the recodification committee think?
Well, again, I think each of us tonight can only speak as individuals because we haven't had the opportunity to meet to discuss the latest round of comments. What I can say, though, is that throughout this process, we have each focused our attentions on certain parts of the bylaw more than others. We took a divide and conquer approach so that each of us could dig more deeply into a limited part of the bylaws. And what I can say for myself is while we were discussing tonight, I was looking through the latest comments from the citizens group, and I didn't see anything further that I felt needed to be addressed in the sections that I focused on. And similarly, throughout this process, each of us have been relying on the other working group members and putting a lot of weight on their opinions of what needed to happen with the sections that they were responsible for. So I would continue to give great deference to what Steve Revelak or Christian or Ralph or Nancy or any of the others have said tonight, because I would give them that deference if we were sitting in a working group meeting.
Andy, what happens to the document if we approve it tonight? Changes, approvals, reviews of people that have not been able to weigh in from the recodification committee. Jenny's updates. What would be the process going forward if we approve tonight to get all those changes or clarifications or so forth, such that we don't lose the momentum as you're suggesting, but we, make sure all that is addressed, and that the recodification committee, all of the members, are supporting it. It was Christian, I think. It was kind of, if you do this, if you do that. I was hoping it would be more, stand behind it.
Yeah.
So maybe I misinterpreted him.
So the process is as with any other vote that we take. We would move to approve this document as amended. And I think what we would do previously is move to accept the comments from Steve Revelak that we've received that we agree with. We'd move to accept any other amendments. For example, Jean's 40B suggestion is one that I agree with. I'd like to see that added back in. And then Christian Klein's comments. I think any of those, if we're in agreement, we move to accept those and to integrate those as part of the document. We'd then move to accept this document, this final document as amended, and move it to special town meeting.
And any other comments that have come in tonight, for instance, from public comment?
We'd have to make those tonight before we voted on the final documents. We'd have to make a decision of whether to include those or to leave those out. And of course, as with any other bylaw amendment at town meeting, there's the opportunity to provide amendments from the floor. So if there are other members out there if there are other town meeting members, out there that wish to make changes, then they have the opportunity to make those from town meeting to the body as a whole.
Thank you.
So if we vote for this with all of the amendments, when is there going to be a final copy that can go out to us, to the town meeting members, to the zoning recodification group?
See how many times I can right-click and accept change over the course of a day. But my guess is it will probably take me an entire day to go through the document and make sure it is in excellent shape to be released and accepts all of the changes and the comments and everything else that we've been talking about. Deals with the formatting issues. There were a couple of things that no matter how many times I try to add it back in, like 1.5, don't seem to go back in until I think all of the things track. So that needs to happen, and that's about how long it will take me. So I would say I will need that many hours, and I will find that many hours within the next couple of days. The idea was to, if we're continuing with the neighborhood meetings, as I think we are, and we have one on Wednesday night, that that document will be available that evening. So, and we will have copies of the document available. So in order to do that, I believe, and this is where Amy, I think we said we would make copies on Wednesday. So that's the best that I can do in terms of timing and availability of this document with all of the changes.
Okay.
And a revised guide to the changes?
The revised guide is a little bit longer than that, and that's going to mean going back through the citizens document and back through comments and feedback that I've received from the working group members. I haven't done updates to that yet, but we'll do that as well. I can't promise that that would also be available on Wednesday night. Try my best, but not guaranteed.
I do want to add one thing that I am very much agreement with. And
use the microphone, please.
I am very much in agreement, Andy, as far as when this should be heard in front of the town. I think it should be a special town meeting, not a regular town meeting. And this should be the sole case for that. So if we do go forward, it'll be this town meeting. I would recommend either for this coming special meeting or having another special town meeting, not regular town meeting. If depending which way, I would just say not having it on a regular town meeting is not going to give enough time to address all the issues fairly.
I think the time has finally come. I think we need to, well, I think regardless of what we decide, if we do decide no action on this evening, I think we should at least go through Steve Revelak's list of changes, Christian Klein's list of changes that have been brought to us this evening that I think address some of the talking points that are out there, and those that we agree with should be integrated into this document regardless, because this is what we'll work with moving forward. I have a list of Steve's that we agreed with, or at least that weren't questioned. I think there were only 2 that we didn't agree with. I can give that to Jenny to be integrated into the document. And I think we have this one, it's something else. And then I think the actual action items, edits that were suggested by Christian Klein are reasonable and worth integrating as well.
And Jeans.
And Jeans. I think we can agree to accept those changes informally. I don't think we need to take a formal vote on that.
You would accept as amended.
Okay.
I think we went through line by line already, so
Yeah.
we're not going to reiterate those again.
And I have those, so I'll give you my list. And then we'll agree to accept Christian Klein's recommended edits, and then we'll agree to accept Jean's 40B edit. Are we all in agreement on that?
Yep.
All right. And so with that,
Were there any other edits suggested by email by zoning working group members?
There were a couple definitions.
I spoke about the definitions that were recommended. Those were from Christian. There was nothing further. Ralph
He,
simply echoed that he agreed with those comments.
yeah, Christian emailed at 10:30 this morning, 10:32 this morning. That was the email Jenny referenced as far as the definitional changes that that we can accept. Building detached, building front, building line, and changing roof joist to roof structure to align with the definition for story half in 5.322B. All those, I think, we're prepared to accept into the document as amendments.
I will just note the only other email that I received since the last hearing was from Joanne Preston, who spoke earlier and is, I don't know, yeah, she's in the back of the room, who made the point that she made was similar to the one that was made in the email to me. Oh, it's been a back and forth between us with regard to rules and regulations, administrative rules and regulations.
Okay. Yeah, I think the administrative rules and regulations has been something that was discussed going back to the original meeting as far as allowing boards to take care of that. And certainly adding the 40B requirement for testimony under oath is not something that would step on the ZBA's toes. I'd be comfortable with putting that in. I think that's an important requirement to keep.
So I have one last question. Let's say we vote this favorably with all of these amendments. It goes to town meeting and it doesn't pass. Can we go back in the fall to another special town meeting?
The question is, if this fails at special town meeting, can we come back in the fall? So Jenny, I'll let you answer that procedural question.
Yes, the board can bring back the bylaw to be voted at future town meeting. And you also have on your agenda for this evening an annual town meeting warrant article, which could still be filed.
Although I agree with Ken, if we don't do this special town meeting, maybe we wait for another one, or schedule it for another one.
All right, so I think we'd need to move, at this point, the only other option, the only other action is to move to either put this to special town meeting or to take no action on it. So entertain a motion to advance this to close the hearing, close all public comment and discussion, and ask for a motion.
All right, I move that with all of the changes we discussed incorporated in, that we accept this for special town meeting.
I'll second it.
I would vote on the language, and this is Article 8.
Okay.
There's a special language I need to say.
Yeah, so I think what would happen is I would consider a motion to advance special town meeting Article 2, zoning bylaw amendment recodification, and the warrant article underneath. I don't think I need to read all of that, but is outlined in the warrant to move this document to our town meeting.
With the amendments.
As amended.
That's my motion, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Great. So moved. Thank you. So, do we need to discuss annual town meeting warrant article? We have additional business to discuss this evening, so I ask you could certainly welcome to stay. If you're leaving, please leave quietly and quickly. You want to get everybody out of here?
I have to leave in 4 morning.
Okay. All right, so let's have a discussion about whether we should put a additional warrant article on for spring town meeting if this fails. This would be another